Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about the league winners. I know it's a really big fantasy league winners is a really big video for everybody that puts out content, and in our video you're going to see some things that you might not have expected. We're not going to necessarily follow trends. We're going to do exactly what we believe is right. We see a lot of people picking the same players. That's not what we're going to do here. I mean, it's all about value. It's all about ADP, and that's how you kind of just decide who your league winners are. Also, guys that just could be the number one overall player at their position, and we're going to give you that. But we're also not going to follow the basic stuff. We're going to, talk about people that we've talked about in the past, of course. But these guys are the guys that we could see taking over on their teams and being, just outshining their ADP by miles. So
Yeah, and again, this is a redraft ranking and list. It's really hard. We can't just pick every single player that's in the first 3 rounds because you're only going to get a couple of those guys, and on top of that, not all of them are great value to begin with, especially compared to stuff like best ball and all that good stuff. So we're going to kick it off. Kimani Vidal for the Chargers, 6th-round rookie. We've been talking him up all summer long. He's become one of our most, if not most exposed player, especially recently. We're just projecting him to eventually overtake this Charger backfield. And obviously, Jim Harbaugh is somebody that loves to, grind it out and just kind of go through the run game. And really, it's just Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who are both kind of either injury prone coming out of their prime, or just somebody that we don't know if you can really rely on being a true workhorse running back. And that's exactly what Kimani Vidal did his final year at Troy, going for over 1,800 yards and 15 touchdowns, and very efficient while he was there. He's just a guy that we just like a lot. It might be frustrating early on, especially it's hard to even buy into he's buried behind depth because he's a 6th-round rookie. I expected him to do that, but
right.
I expect him to have a strong preseason and then just kind of work his way, continuing to ease on. And obviously, he's somebody that's probably not going to be drafted. And if he is, he's in deep leagues and you're stashing him. You're not even touching him on the bench, but he will pay dividends over time and then especially late in the season.
Yeah, and I remember, we did the video when the draft ended, and we're like, who's our favorite drafts and stuff, and the Chargers was one of them, of course. But then we're talking about all these guys that were on the Chargers, and I hadn't really talked about Kimani Vidal in anything leading up to that point. I didn't see Kimani Vidal as a top 10 running back from the class, but opportunity matters, and the situation that he got placed into. And at the Chargers, we talked about it. Whoever gets drafted to the Chargers or the Cowboys, we're going to really love. And of course, it's all about fits. It's all about styles, of course. But Kimani Vidal is the perfect fit, perfect style of player for what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. That heavy run, 40 times, 50 times a game, Kimani Vidal fits that. He's had the tread on his tires. Of course, you don't always want to see that, but in his situation, he's never really been have injuries. He's going to be very strong. He has very strong legs and stuff like that. He hasn't ever dealt with anything like that. So we're going to knock on some wood and hope that he stays healthy, of course. And of course, then you have the other two running backs there with him, and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards that have had those injuries. Kimani could start day one, and we just can't really say that about any of the other rookies, especially not somebody going in the 160s, 170s. We're expecting in redraft leagues not to draft this guy, but he could be the starting running back on one of the highest volume teams in the league. It's really hard for me to just get away from that, I guess. So
yeah, and again, everybody has a league winner that they pick up off the waiver. We anticipate he's going to be one of those guys unless somebody just takes a shot on him. Really, redraft hasn't caught up to where, and he hasn't cracked the top 160 in any of them. Best ball, he's starting to get into the 150s and even 140s, and we're still taking him at those points because, again, we're taking a stand on that guy. And if it ends up being just by committee, good on you. But it's probably not going to work out in the grand scheme of things for any of them,
right.
relative to where Gus Edwards is going in the 11th round, or J.K. Dobbins, who I just can't get behind him. We love him. He's from Texas. We played against him before, but just a back-to-back Achilles and then an ACL.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to invest draft capital in that.
Yeah, so the next guy on the list is Curtis Samuel, and he's a guy that's risen a good amount. Something that we've talked about a little bit is how they're using him this year, and he's been playing running back a good amount, which is I think sets his floor really high. So even if you were worried about Curtis Samuel, well maybe he's not maybe he's the number 3 option, 4 option in this on this offense. Well, now he might get 5 rushing ups touches, which gives you somewhat of a little bump, rushing upside for touchdowns. Last year he had 1 rushing touchdown, so that gives him a little bit more opportunity there. And it's another guy that we just think is really good at football, and
Yeah, and
bet on it.
also he's reunited with a former OC that he had in Carolina.
Yep.
Obviously, he only spent 1 year with him, but when he was a wide receiver 24 overall, which is a wide receiver 2 in your redraft leagues, and I guarantee you he was not drafted in that range. So right now he's going in the 8th round. Um, Again, kind of similar to what we've said before about Dalton Kincaid, who we love and are drafting a lot. There's just opportunity for somebody to break out and break free, and we just aren't convinced that Keon Coleman's just going to instantly come into a wide receiver 1 workload. Curtis Samuel really kind of came into his own post, I guess, week 10
Mm-hmm.
last year with Washington. He's always kind of been in and out and like the afterthought guy, but just he's always kind of coming at you. And Khalil Shakir,
Mm,
a lot of people are talking up, and we're just not buying it. And training camp is kind of showing that right now. Curtis Samuel, we just keep on seeing positive reports. He made a sick catch today
mm-hmm.
in the end zone. He's taking snaps, like you said, out of the backfield, and they don't really. They invested, what was it? Ray J was a 5th round pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not a ton of major draft capital into a running back room that really isn't relied upon anyways. So I mean, yeah, Curtis Samuel, I think, is going to be a very similar type of what Cole Beasley was when he was getting like 110 targets a season early on with Josh Allen. So we think the floor is really high, like we said, or like M said. Um, and, we'll just kind of see. But I think he's just kind of a poor man's Jaden Reed,
Yeah.
Swiss Army knife that's just going to kind of steadily get you 10 to 12 points every week.
Quick thing to note. I love looking at this part. I saw this tweet earlier, so I went and looked it up. But Curtis Samuel's quarterbacks in his career include Cam Newton, Kyle Allen, Teddy Bridgewater, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, and Sam Howell. Now he has Josh Allen. It's like the step up in ability. Now that doesn't always mean that he's going to produce more, but he has the opportunities. He's got a better quarterback. He's probably the most talented receiver, and age matters here. He's done it longer, so Keon Coleman might be more talented at the end of the day. But right now, first 6, 7, 8 games, he's probably the number 1 option, opposite Dalton Kincaid, of course. And then our next guy, we go to Green Bay. Christian Watson. He's a guy that I'm pushing as much as I can. I think I'm even pushing him too much almost sometimes. But it's like the opportunity, if he has those boom games that we saw in his rookie year and those things like that, he's so athletic. First off, he blew the combine out when he did it originally. So he's extremely athletic. If he can get his leg figured out, his 20% difference in his hamstrings, if that is fixed, I just think I have a hard time believing that he's not the best receiver in that receiver room. I know that Jaden Reed was really good last year. I know that he's the more consistent guy. He's not the deep threat as much, but he's really good in the red zone. Christian Watson is like a guy where you could throw it to him 4 times. He goes for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's exciting to me.
Yeah, and again, if you just look at the position rank, it's not that crazy different. I mean, ESPN were right on the head, wide receiver 40, and Yahoo and Sleeper 43, 47, respectively. The main difference is overall because running backs are just pushed up, and in best ball we've seen, he's kind of in the 6th or so round,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to draft as like a wide receiver 4 for depth, and then we target running backs later. Well, basically, those kind of situations are flipped in redraft leagues where these Najee Harris and Jonathan Brooks and Brian Robinson Jr. over the worlds are going in the 6th, 7th rounds, and so those receivers, wherever they are being pushed back into the 8th round, and
Right. Yeah.
it's just like those are the kind of spots where you really kind of find those diamonds in the rough. And like you said, it's a wash away year last year with he came into I think he suffered his injury very early in the preseason,
Yeah.
and then it just kind of lingered, missed some time, re-aggravation, and it just obviously did not work out. And so his ADP is kind of right where it was last year. The only thing is Dontavius Wicks has some hype. Romeo Dobbs is quote unquote reliable, and then Jaden Reed was the true breakout for Green
Hmm.
Bay last year. So there's a lot of competition, but no one really has the upside from a week in week out basis that Christian Watson does.
Right. And we just did our second year breakout players. And, if this was, if we could put him on that list, we probably would because he didn't really get his opportunity to break out like we were hoping. Um, I think he could go on that list right now and be very, very suitable. But let's see, 1 second. Sorry, I got to hit my buttons here. Next up is Kyler Murray. The reason Kyler's on this list is because quarterback was really difficult because there's not a big separation in like position ADP, but there's a guy in Kyler that, of course, missed a lot of last year, and that could be and then gets a really good receiver. I mean, he only played 4 games last year. Gets a really good receiver, has an upgraded tight end, finally really pushing to be that guy. He just has a lot of offensive things that are going well. Trey Benson, a new running back that's really explosive, not James Conner, who kind of just falls forward and rolls down the field. Jonah Williams added to his offensive line, helps him out, in that way. Um, I think that Kyler just has some upside, and it's not being represented because of the fact that he was injured most of last year.
Yeah, I think people are just kind of forgetting about the floor that he provides. And case in point, that's why he's above Anthony Richardson in our drafts, just because he is Anthony Richardson in terms of the rushing upside, but he also can throw.
Yeah.
And so now, last year, complete wash year, he tore his ACL at the end of the 2022 season. He missed half the year. We expected it. We were off him. We didn't want to touch him, and he still had about 18 points a game. So now add his legs back because he's got a full off season, hasn't been limited in any way,
Hmm.
and now he's got a new wide receiver one. Whether you think that he's going to live up to his record breaking ADP for a rookie, that remains to be seen. But it's a better situation, and he's got top 5 upside and probably a top 8 floor as long as he's healthy.
Right.
Should be competitive in a lot of games, a lot of opportunities to make ends meet in terms of producing, and we just like him a lot. We're getting a ton of him, and there's a lot of Arizona players that we like that are reasonable to stack around him as well.
Well, another thing is you were talking about Anthony Richardson. Well, Kyler actually knows how to slide.
Yes,
He played baseball, and he was
it's the only guy ever to be a top 10 pick in both the
yeah
MLB and the NFL.
craziness. Was he not first in? Wait, was he top? He was top 5 in
I think
baseball, right?
I think he was 8th overall, but
Eighth.
I'm not a
Okay.
baseball fan, so
Yeah, I'm
I don't
not.
know
Yeah, I
that
don't
top of my
follow
head.
it that well, but I mean, I should know that when it's a football player. But and a guy from Texas, played
Hmm.
down the road. But yeah, I think that his upside is insane, and we are overlooking it a little bit in ADPs. I think if like right now, if you look at the guys that are around him, Dak's ahead of him, which I think is fine. Joe Burrow in ours is ahead of him, not so much in others. CJ Stroud, but like all those guys are, going to stand in the pocket and throw the ball. They don't have the same upside running the ball like he does, and he could take over a game. We loved Justin Fields last year. He had 100 yards of throwing, but he had 200 yards rushing.
Hmm.
Well, Kyler doesn't have necessarily 200 yards in him, but like, you could flip those and get 4 touchdowns out of him on any given week. So,
Right,
um,
and it all just kind of comes down to what he does and brings back in terms of rushing upside. Because you have the QB1 and twos like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen running for 15 touchdowns. Well, back in 2020 when he was QB3 overall in terms of points per game, 24 points a game, he had 11 rushing touchdowns. The year after that, he was right around 22 points a game, and that was with only 5. But he killed it through the air.
mhm.
Um, if he can get back to, his 600 yards, but, flirt with about 8 rushing touchdowns, you're going to be very happy with your return. And right now he's kind of going around the 7th round. He's the one quarterback that's kind of consistent across all platforms. And, he's the guy that we're nominating in this list just because everybody else is kind of pushing up every other quarterback, and we're just like, well, he should be there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next guy on this list is a guy we talked about all summer long. Brock Bowers might be the biggest differential when it comes to Yahoo and ESPN for just overall. But also position wise, Yahoo has him at the tight end 15, which is just insane. I don't know how they're finding 8 other tight ends that are better than him than we are. But I mean, at the same time, like you look at him and you think, what can he do? Right. Well, he was the best. He's the best prospect to ever play the position coming out of college. Freshman year, walked in, just complete badass. He's built like one of like a Hawkinson or like a Kittle style player, but at the same time, he's been just so productive in the passing game and receiving. Um, it's just really hard, especially when you see Laporta um, and a guy like Kincaid and all these other guys that had done so well this last year. And then you're like, well, Brock Bowers isn't supposed to be a top 12 tight end. And I'm like, why not? Like you had the number 1 overall tight end and he was a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brock Bowers is way better than him, like on paper. And of course, that doesn't always make the NFL, but like we believe in all of the hype. The hype in this room is believed on in Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is so awesome. He's a Raider. Let's do it.
Yeah, with Brock, it's really tough to project the kind of overall output that he'll have, but
Right.
it's just hard to not see the path for him to be a top 10 tight end. And right now, basically, no platform has him as a top 10 tight end other than Sleeper. And I don't know what's so different in there to where he's kind of right where we are ranked, but they're very different from everybody else as well because he's basically 100th or worse in everything else. There's opportunity, man. I know Devontae Adams is just a high target share guy. There is an outside chance that he might not be there the full season. But even if he is, they're going to be trailing a ton. Zamir White is their new starting running back, and he is a complete zero as a pass catcher.
Right.
So there's no, running back that's going to get a frustrating 80 targets to take away from, the safety valve or blanket Brock Bowers will provide. He also lines up in the backfield. He's also killing it at camp so far.
Because he's him. Because he
Yeah,
is
he
that
is,
guy.
and I just don't see, what did and last year, even though Sam Laporta was tight end 1 overall, it was one of the worst, performances from the
Right.
tight end 1 that we've seen. He just had 14.1 points a game. He had 860 yards, but he had 9 touchdowns. That was really kind of the difference. Nobody else near him. Essentially, the next highest guy was 6, and
10 touchdowns. I'm showing 10.
I'm looking at weeks 1 through 17.
Yeah. 10
So yeah,
touchdowns
10
last year.
touchdowns last year, and didn't really. No one else came close. No one had more than 6, and so
Yeah, but
I don't see that big of a discrepancy. One with him, but with Bowers, take away the touchdowns, but 800 plus yards, and he'll also provide some rushing upside. I just don't see how he can't be a value right now where he's going.
Yeah, and I want to say that, Laporta was the 5th overall when it came to actual yards, receiving yards. That included guys like Hawkinson, who didn't play the whole year. Kittle actually had the most receiving yards last year, and he did that on 65 receptions, which is nuts. But yeah, I just think the upside with a guy that has been so good in college, and I know that we talk about the position that's the hardest to, go from college to the pros is tight end. Well, he's just been so dominant that we just have no reason not to believe that he will be able to transition. He's not from Iowa is the only reason we should probably, second guess it, I guess, because he didn't play at Iowa. He plays at Georgia. But yeah, so I think that, the floor should be there, especially because he will be probably our second or third option out the gate, just depending on if he's out over Jacoby Meyer. But it's just tight end 15. Like, I don't know. I don't know about all that. So he's exciting. And then the next guy we're going to talk about, we've talked about him literally all summer and on multiple shows, and you probably heard his name a few times, is Jaxon Smith-Njigba. JSN going into this year, it's a new offense. 3 wide receiver sets is going to be the name of the game. So he will be on the field all the time. He plays in the slot, and that's always a little bit easier. Like the distance of the pass is always a little bit easier from the slot. He's a quicker guy. He was the number one wide receiver in his class. Like he has all the upside in the world. And DK got paid. Tyler Lockett most likely getting pushed out of the offense, and I think JSN just fits in really well into what we should expect here.
Yeah, and I've said this before, but essentially he was wide receiver 48 last year, and he's essentially that's where he's going right now. And I think you're drafting him at his absolute floor. And I think at worst this year he's going to be flipping stat lines with Tyler Lockett, which granted him a wide receiver 32 finish last year. So if you're getting that from a guy who's going as a wide receiver 5 or even 4, depending on the platform that you're on, just sign me up. I think Seattle will be passing a lot more. His snap share will be a lot higher. He was, just kind of struggling to get on the field last year because they were one of the bottom in terms of the receiver sets. And, you get an offense that's kind of more inclined towards his skill set. Um, I really like his upside to potentially crack the top 30. And right now, we're just kind of modestly putting him as a wide receiver 34. 63rd seems kind of crazy, but we also are valuing receivers more, especially considering we're doing a PPR ranking, not a half PPR.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, not much to say about him. I mean, we've talked about him on every show, I feel like. And so, if you like throughout the summer, we're going to continue talking about him. We're going to talk about his recaps and stuff like that. So, it'll just continue going. If you watch our live streams, he'll be on there, I'm sure. So, yeah, come check out the live streams and we'll talk about some Jason. And then, next guy on the board is Dalton Kincaid. He's possibly going to be the number one option in Buffalo for Josh Allen. If that happens, he has upside of 130 targets, probably 140 targets. That gives him a super high floor, and it's just they don't have anybody else. It's that cut and dry. It's like Keon Coleman is a rookie, probably won't be very good for first 6 weeks minimum. And then on top of that, he disappears in games at times. And then you've got Shakur, who has never really been asked to be a number one, number two. He was possibly a number three, most likely a number four option all of his career. And then Curtis Samuel. And Curtis Samuel is actually really good, but we've seen him line up in the backfield all camp. So that means that, they're trying to get different and make ways to get the ball to that guy. But it's such an open offense. 8 targets, 9 targets, 10 targets. I don't see why we couldn't see that multiple times this year. So,
yeah, the biggest thing for me is that last year he just kind of seemed out of role because, averaging less than 10 yards a catch is never ideal. It doesn't seem like that's any kind of explosiveness or what have you. But, he was very, very, stretching the field throughout his college career. His infamous game or famous game, rather, where he's going 16 for over 200 against USC. It's like that's not saying that's like a upside for him in the NFL, but that's the capability that he has when he has a reliable workload. And last year he was just kind of like, oh, we're just gonna, no one is open downfield, throw it 4 yards to the out and try to get a first down. That was kind of his role. Now this year he's going to be relied a lot more to extend the field and move the chains and stuff. I think it's a role that'll suit him. He's going right around, Dalton King, or I'm sorry, Mark Andrews and Trey McBride, guys we love as well. But really, the 5th, 6th rounds is where you should be targeting tight ends. And even on Yahoo, like 74th right now in the 7th round is his ADP, and I just can't fathom that.
That's so low. I mean, I guess we just have a difference in opinion on these tight ends. Like it just is what it is. Like we have, Brock higher. We've got, I don't know. Like we just happen to also see that there's 11 really good tight ends, and that doesn't normally show up. And I've had buddies ask me like, oh, should I go Laporta or Kelsey in this draft? And I'm like, well, you don't have to because you could
2 rounds later, you can get these guys, and they've got almost the same upside.
Yeah, and then 2 rounds later after them, you get more guys, and then there's more guys, and then right at the 105 mark, you could probably get Brock Bowers, and it's like you don't have to go big tight end this year. And of course, people will. They might drop a little bit, but like it's more spread out and gives you an opportunity. We think Kincaid is a guy that could, be the number one overall tight end. We couldn't rank him there, but it's just the fact that he is no competition for targets like these other guys. Sam Laporta has to play next to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he
in
had
a
less than
heavy run
900 yards.
game.
And yeah, exactly. There's just a lot of mouths to feed in Detroit.
There is in Kansas City as well, but we also know that Travis has a rapport.
Right.
But he is also 35 now.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just assume that he's just going to be a dominant tight end one, like we've seen him for so long.
Yep. And then the next guy, we go to the Chicago Bears and Keenan Allen. He's one spot on our rankings above Dalton Kincaid. But if you look, he's 20 spots, 24 spots ahead in Yahoo. He's 8 wide receiver spots higher than the Yahoo rankings, and it's just like, what did Keenan Allen do to not deserve to be a top 25 receiver? Because he last year when he was healthy, he was wide receiver 3. Um, for the whole year, I don't remember exactly where he ended, but like I know it was up there for
He
sure. So
finished overall, he was 8,
mm-hmm.
wide receiver 8, but in terms of fantasy points per game, he was number 3. He missed 4 games and still averaged 21.5 points a game, 150 targets in 13 games. And obviously, that's with a more air raid offense that is also with Justin Herbert. But also, we've never really seen DJ Moore be a high just take away from elite receivers. No, the best receiver he's ever played with is Robbie Chosen, or Robbie Anderson formerly. And those 2 seasons that he played with, took 100 targets from DJ
Right.
Moore both seasons. Now he's got to play with a multi-time Pro Bowler that, is closer to averaging about 130, 140 in his career in healthy seasons. And we just think he's much safer, yet he's going 2 rounds past DJ Moore, and it's kind of hard to fathom right now.
Yeah, and they were both top 10 last year. They both ended top 10. One of them had 16.6, 16.9 fantasy points per game. One had 21, one and a half. And it's not that, we think that, DJ Moore isn't better or you should be higher ranked. We do. We actually have DJ Moore higher ranked than Keenan Allen. It's just the gap is not as big as everybody wants to act like it is. Keenan Allen might be old. He might have missed a couple games last year, but he's still, when he's on the field, one of the best receivers in the game. And that's why he deserves to be this high. And why he's a league winner is because when he's on the field, that is what league winner does, is he gets you to the promised land. And if he's playing in week 17, you're probably doing pretty good, But yeah. And then the next guy on the list, one of our running backs, Alvin Kamara, he's just going a little bit too low. And it just doesn't really make too much sense to me when, of course, he's not necessarily the rushing upside guy, but he could get 5 targets a game and no one would bat an eye. So
Yeah, with Alvin Kamara, we were kind of completely off him last year. He, started off suspended, and first off, we thought it was going to be a longer one. It ended up being 3 games, but we just thought he was going to turn into a more inefficient back. His offensive line was getting worse, and yet he still goes out there and coming back ends up RB11 overall, 17.9 points a game, which was, I believe, in the top 3. Yeah, 3rd overall in terms of running backs in points per game. And then he had the 2nd most receptions, were not for Brees Hall. It's just peppered targets the last couple of weeks. He would have led that, and 86 targets in 13 games, which is pretty impressive. And yeah, on top of that, we in our 2nd year breakout, we were going to have Kendre Miller, former TCU running back there, to be somebody that was going to turn into a 1B and kind of start to flirt with and kind of eventually push Alvin Kamara down the trail a little bit. And then he's injured again and negatively being discussed in the media right now by coaches and former players. And right now it's just like Alvin Kamara is the only guy they got. Their offensive line actually got even worse. And, he should still be a PPR monster this year. Even last year, just being inefficient running the football, he still killed it as a running back in fantasy. And, we don't see anything any different. And right now he's going outside the top 30 in redraft for the most part. Sleeper at least has their head on straight a little bit.
right. Yeah.
Which, I mean, they're much, much higher on him overall than most people are. But still, I just we're not predicting another top 5 season, but we just think he's one of the safer running backs you can do, especially at the ADP that we're currently seeing.
Yeah, and I think, he was inefficient and still capable of winning you leagues. And that's all that matters when it comes to fantasy football is those guys that you can find that can do that. The next guy and the last guy on our list is a guy with a new team, Stefon Diggs, wide receiver 9 last year. We actually talked about it, and we've actually done a ton of videos on schedule and how schedule matters. But he had one of the hardest second half stretches last year based on schedule. And that is why he did not end up being the number one overall player in fantasy or a number one overall wide receiver in fantasy because before that, he was top 3 the whole year.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, he plays some hard games and he drops all the way to 9. And that's why fantasy, scheduling is so important. Well, it's almost like we forgot how good he was because of that or something. Because all of a sudden, he drops from being a top 10 player, top 10 draft pick in fantasy to to us. We have him at 20th overall, which even almost feels a little low, but it's not truly. And then like Yahoo 43rd and the wide receiver 23. Now the other two are a little bit closer. We know in best ball he's not close at all. He's almost behind Tank Dell now.
Mhm.
So I don't know why talent has fallen away from Stefon Diggs when he was, done so many good things. He had 1,183 yards last year, guys. Like,
Yeah, with him, it's more so just kind of where he's going in most leagues, and also especially in best ball because Tank Dell's closed the gap, and a lot of people are trying to convince you Tank Dell is going to be the more efficient receiver. The only way that I see this happening is if just one injury and you can't predict that, but two, he just kind of completely divas out and just either gets Antonio Brown with the Raiders, a la Raiders, where it completely falls apart and he doesn't even play it down or is moved on from very early on.
right.
Other than that, high volume offense, going to be one of the highest scoring teams, and he's just been a continuous target hog throughout his career. And we obviously have him right next to Nico, and our rankings have him as the top guy. And that's not necessarily a confident stand that we're taking, but in terms of overall, like we said, that's the stand we're taking is just he's going too late.
Yeah.
You're getting a potential, low end wide receiver 1 that is going in the 4th, 5th rounds, depending on what you're using on, and more so in the 4th. But um, the hype's not really on him right now, and we think that he just kind of deserves it a little bit more. And it is a polarizing pick. It's not something that I have a huge stand on or a ton of confidence in. But again, it was really tough in the top end just because the ADPs are all over the place, and we're just trying to see guys that stand out. And right now, Stefon Diggs does.
Yeah, and I want to say that, Stefon Diggs was ranked 9th last year. And that's a big deal because he not only was he ranked 9th, he played all 17 games. So the you got the productivity throughout the whole year, which is important. You can't just, you can't always pick a guy and him give you, 14 games. We just talked about Keenan Allen. We love Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen actually outscored Stefon Diggs by, I don't know, 5 full points. But, if Keenan Allen doesn't play in week 17 and you're in the finals, then it's a little bit more difficult to justify picking him because I'm here to win the whole thing. I'm here to get, the big prize or whatever. Well, Stefon Diggs was on the field for 17 games last year. And as long as that continues,
Right. And
we're happy
everybody
with him.
wants to write him off after a poor, second half of the season. But you look at the first half, again, while we were so nervous, he was wide receiver 3 overall, 21.7 points a game, 7 touchdowns in the first 9 weeks of the season. Like the production is still there. He just had a horrible finish to the season, on coupled with Josh Allen not playing too well. And then also schematically, they just weren't really doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like Gabe Davis was doing cardio and having multiple zero target games, and there was the Dallas game also where it was just a rainy game. They chose to run it 60 times,
Mm-hmm.
and so a lot of kind of factors went into that to where he also finished the season poorly. But they didn't trade him for a second round pick. and then cut his contract to being a contract year for him to be the third guy on the team in targets.
Right. And also, I want to say that, with him, he played in the cold for the end of the season, every season, right? Well, now he's going to Houston, which is in a dome. And it's not even cold in Texas when it is. So I don't, do you know, you're going to hopefully pull the schedule up
Yeah,
for me
I'm gonna try to see if there's
and to
any
see what,
cold games. There's a big Saturday game in Week 16 against Kansas City. By that time, you'll be in the postseason if you are. But in the meantime, you get Green Bay early, which is outside, but it's in October, so it shouldn't be terrible. Jets are also in October. You got Dallas that's in a dome. You got Jacksonville that's in Florida in December. Um, you know, and then everything else is at home. So really, there's no poor weather other than games that you're playing in October, and that isn't really going to be the games that lead you to the championship.
yeah, if you can play in Buffalo at the end of the year, you can play in Kansas City at mid October. It's fine. But yeah, so that's why we think Stefon Diggs is reasonable at his ADP, and I think that we're forgetting how good he is at football. So I think that's big. And then, that's it. That's
Yeah.
all of our guys. So yeah, that was our league winners video. They're not. Everybody's gonna have their own league winners, but paint the picture. Make a reason. Decide why you're going to pick somebody. If you don't like the Dalton Kincaid pick and you're like, no, Trey McBride is going to be the guy this year. Well, okay, fine. Explain and tell yourself why and make it a good reason. Okay, Kyler
Also, no,
Pickens
you're
is that.
not the only one that's saying that because a ton of people are on Trey McBride.
Yeah,
That's kind of the main goal that we wanted to do within this set of guys that we did was get different with the players that we were suggesting because we're not trying to just follow suit with everybody that's just like, oh yeah, Trey McBride's the best, or yeah, you should draft CMC 101. Like what is that going to help you guys? We're trying to be different, show you guys take stands on people that not many people are on, and for the most part, we feel pretty good about where these guys will pan out and shake out. But we want to know who your league winner is. Who is the guy that you're most looking forward to targeting, whether that be in the first round through the 10th round? It doesn't matter. Who's the guy that you just don't want to leave your draft with? I want to know. And then again, explain your reason why. Don't just say, "Hey, it's this guy's season." Like I want to know like the reason behind why you're taking the stand on this guy, and you might convince me to be taking more shares in best ball and maybe snipe him from a couple of my friends
right.
come next month.
Yeah, okay, we'll see. No, we're gonna be fighting over some players coming next month for sure. But yeah, we appreciate y'all hanging out. Go get in the comments, subscribe, like this video for sure. Go see our socials. Discord's been kicking up. Hopefully, we can start getting real conversations in there about different things. Talking about prize picks, underdog. When we get closer to the season, we're gonna do Sunday morning live streams, and we want content for those, like ask questions prior to those streams so that we can have Q&As, almost like we can answer those questions that you have. That way we're not just looking at the chat the whole time and just answering those. We'll have some pre questions ready to go. So yeah, that's all for us though. We really appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we'll see y'all next time.
See you on the next one.